must have, what, 11, 12 stomach ulcers. I live with Renee.
When people hear the name Gordon Ramsay, they usually picture the loud, fiery British chef who shouts at failing cooks and throws raw food into the trash. But long before he became a global TV personality, Gordon Ramsay was simply a hardworking chef trying to make great food. His early life was not easy. He grew up in Scotland and England, trained under strict French chefs, and pushed himself until he earned Michelin stars for his restaurants. By 2004, Ramsay was already respected in the food world. Yet that same year, everything changed. A new television show in the United Kingdom called Kitchen Nightmares would turn him into a household name around the world. The idea behind Kitchen Nightmares was simple. Gordon would visit restaurants that were about to go out of business, figure out what was wrong, and help them turn things around in just a week. It sounded impossible, but that's what made it exciting. Audiences watched as Gordon walked into dirty kitchens, tasted disgusting food, and faced owners who had given up. Then, in a few short days, he transformed their menus, cleaned their kitchens, and trained their staff to cook like professionals. The results were dramatic. Sometimes the restaurant survived, sometimes it didn't, but it was always emotional television. Viewers loved Gordon's honesty. He didn't sugarcoat things. If the food was bad, he said so. If the owner was lazy, he told them straight to their face. His mix of anger, humor, and heart made the show stand out from any other cooking program at the time. By 2007, Kitchen Nightmares crossed the Atlantic and landed in the United States on the Fox network. The American version took everything that worked in Britain and made it even bigger. The restaurants were worse, the arguments louder, and the makeovers more dramatic. Each week, millions of viewers tuned in to see what Gordon would say next. It became one of the most popular reality shows on television. The show earned nominations for major TV awards, and Ramsay himself became a celebrity far beyond the kitchen. Suddenly, he was not only a chef, but a brand appearing in Hell's Kitchen. MasterChef and the F word. On the surface, it looked like he had achieved everything: fame, success, and respect. But behind the scenes, things were not as perfect as they appeared. Running a restaurant is hard enough. Running several while filming non-stop TV shows is brutal. Gordon was traveling across continents, shooting long hours, eating terrible food during filming, and constantly dealing with stress. Yet he kept going, believing that Kitchen Nightmares was making a difference. At first, it truly was. Many of the early restaurants improved their standards and stayed open for years. But as the show grew in popularity, something changed. Producers began to receive more applications from owners who wanted publicity rather than help. Some restaurant owners cared more about being on television than about saving their businesses. Ramsay started to notice that pattern, and it bothered him deeply. Still, the show kept going strong through the late 2000s and early 2010s. It became a cultural phenomenon. People quoted Gordon's famous lines, shared clips online, and made memes about his temper. He became both feared and loved for his brutal honesty. But while the audience was laughing and cheering, Gordon himself was beginning to feel the weight of what he was doing. The numbers told a painful truth. A report from a reality TV website later revealed that around 82% of the American restaurants featured on Kitchen Nightmares eventually closed. That means out of 10 restaurants, only 2 survived after the cameras left. For Gordon, a perfectionist who built his name on quality and discipline, that statistic hurt more than anyone realized. To him, every failure felt personal. Every closure felt like a broken promise. Slowly, the show that had made him famous was starting to take something away from him. To understand why, Gordon Ramsay finally ended Kitchen Nightmares. You have to understand what he was dealing with each week behind the camera. When people watch the show, they see him yelling and swearing. But what they don't see is the emotional strain that came with it. Many of the restaurant owners he tried to help were in deep trouble, not just financially but personally. Some were struggling with addiction, depression, or family conflicts. Others simply refused to accept responsibility for their problems. Ramsay would spend days trying to motivate them, redesign their kitchens, and teach them new recipes. only to see them fall back into bad habits as soon as filming ended. That pattern happened again and again. Over time, it made him feel like he was fighting a battle he could never win. It wasn't only emotional stress. There were serious physical risks too. Because the restaurants were often in terrible condition, Gordon sometimes got sick from the food he had to taste. In interviews, he mentioned suffering food poisoning several times during filming. Imagine walking into a kitchen with spoiled meat, moldy produce, and filthy equipment, then being asked to taste the food to give an honest reaction. It wasn't acting. It was real. Each time he took a bite, there was a risk to his health. The long hours didn't help either. The filming schedule could stretch past midnight, with Gordon spending days on his feet, shouting, cleaning, and guiding staff. Even for a tough chef like him, it started to wear him down. The more he worked, the more he realized that television editing could only do so much. The show might end with a smiling owner and cheering customers, but once the cameras left, reality often set back in. Bills piled up, owners ignored Gordon's advice, and the same mistakes returned. In the public eye, Kitchen Nightmares looked like a show about success. For Gordon, it was becoming a show about repeated disappointment. Each failure chipped away at his motivation. He started questioning whether the show was really helping anyone, or whether it was simply entertainment built on other people's collapse. Another issue was how some participants treated the experience. Instead of appreciating the opportunity to learn from one of the world's top chefs, a few restaurant owners saw the show as a chance to get free publicity. They didn't want to change. They just wanted their 15 minutes of fame. Once filming ended, they went back to their old ways. For Ramsay, that attitude was infuriating. He took his job seriously. He believed in hard work, honesty, and improvement. Watching people waste that chance made him angry and sad at the same time. It also made him question the purpose of the show. Was it really about saving restaurants, or had it become about making good television? By 2014, Ramsay had reached a breaking point. He had spent 7 years filming Kitchen Nightmares in both the UK and the US. He had faced hundreds of failing restaurants and countless stressful moments. But one experience in particular pushed him past his limit. It happened in a ski resort in southern France. The restaurant looked fine on paper, but when Gordon arrived, he found an owner who simply didn't care. The man had a perfect location with almost no competition, so he served poor-quality food at high prices because he knew tourists had nowhere else to go. He wasn't failing out of ignorance, he was failing out of greed. When Ramsay tried to help, the owner resisted everything. He argued, ignored advice, and treated the whole process like a publicity stunt. For Gordon, this was the final straw. He wasn't just dealing with laziness anymore. He was dealing with someone who disrespected the very idea of good food and honest service. Filming that episode was torture. Ramsay later joked that the man wouldn't even trust me to run his bath, let alone his restaurant. The frustration was unlike anything he had ever felt on the show. He realized that no matter how much effort he gave, some people would never change. That week, he began to ask himself a painful question. What was the point of continuing? If the people he was helping didn't want to be helped, then why was he risking his health and sanity for them? It was the question that would eventually end Kitchen Nightmares for good. One morning, still filming at that ski resort, Gordon woke up and felt something he hadn't felt before: clarity. He looked at the situation, the cameras, the restaurant, and the frustration surrounding him, and he realized he was done. Not just with that episode, but with the entire show. For years he had tried to save people who didn't want to be saved, and it was tearing him apart. In that quiet moment, he decided to walk away. When filming ended, he went home and made one of the hardest phone calls of his career. He called the executives at Fox Network directly. There were no press teams or long negotiations. He simply told them he couldn't continue. At first, they didn't believe him. Kitchen Nightmares was still performing well in ratings. It was a profitable show, with millions of loyal fans. The executives tried to convince him to take a short break, maybe a year off, but Ramsay refused. His mind was made up. He explained that the emotional and physical cost was too high, and he didn't want to keep pretending that show was working when he knew it wasn't. That conversation surprised everyone in the industry. Usually, when a popular show ends, it's because of low ratings or network decisions. This time, the star himself ended it voluntarily. In a world where television success often means pushing until collapse, Ramsay's choice was unusual and deeply human. After the final episode aired, many fans were disappointed, but most respected his honesty. Over the years, Ramsay has talked about that decision in interviews. He said he had reached a point where continuing the show felt wrong. The format had stopped delivering what it promised. The experience was no longer positive for him or for the people he was trying to help. Walking away allowed him to protect both his integrity and his health. And even though Kitchen Nightmares ended, Gordon Ramsay didn't disappear. He continued building his television empire with Hell's Kitchen, MasterChef, MasterChef Jr., and Next Level Chef. Each show carried his signature style discipline, passion, and a relentless demand for excellence, but they were also safer, more controlled environments. None required him to eat spoiled food or argue with hopeless restaurant owners for a week straight. Looking back now, Kitchen Nightmares remains one of Ramsay's most iconic shows. It revealed both the best and worst sides of the restaurant industry and of Ramsay himself. It showed his compassion as well as his temper, his patience as well as his frustration. It made millions of people interested in food and inspired many young chefs to take their careers seriously. But it also taught Ramsay a personal lesson that even the most successful person can burn out. If they give too much without getting anything back, the show may have ended, but its impact on him and his audience never faded. Today, 58, Gordon Ramsay continues to run restaurants and produce television shows around the world. He's still intense, still demanding, but also more reflective. In recent interviews, he's admitted that the years of Kitchen Nightmares changed him. They made him appreciate honesty even more, but also taught him the importance of balance. Sometimes, he said, you can't help people who don't want to be helped. And if you keep trying, you'll lose yourself in the process. That line sums up why he ended the show. It wasn't about quitting. It was about self-preservation. He realized that in order to keep inspiring others, he needed to protect his own energy and health first. Fans still rewatch old episodes online, fascinated by the drama, the chaos, and the moments of real transformation. For many, Kitchen Nightmares will always be Ramsay's most honest show because it captured him at his rawest angry, caring, disappointed, and determined all at once. It showed that behind the shouting and the insults was a man who genuinely wanted people to succeed. But it also showed that even he has limits. In the end, that honesty may be what made Gordon Ramsay a legend, not just his cooking skills or his sharp tongue, but his willingness to walk away when something no longer felt right. So when people ask why Kitchen Nightmares was canceled, the real answer is simple. It wasn't the network, the ratings, or the critics. It was Gordon Ramsay himself, choosing to stop before the nightmare consumed him completely. And that decision, as painful as it was, turned out to be one of the smartest moves of his career. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to keep fighting, but to know when it's time to close the kitchen. Hang up the apron and finally get a good night's rest. On a cold night in September 1327, deep inside the stone walls of Berkeley Castle in England, a king was said to have met one of the most horrible deaths in history. His name was Edward II, a man who had once ruled a powerful kingdom, but whose story ended in betrayal, pain, and mystery. According to one old tale, he was killed with a red-hot poker, burned from the inside so that there would be no mark of violence on his body. It's a story that sounds almost too cruel to believe, and yet for hundreds of years it has been told and retold as the shocking fate of England's fallen king. But what if this story isn't true at all? What if the truth is far stranger and Edward II didn't die in that castle at all? Edward's life began like a fairy tale. He was born in 1284, the son of King Edward I, known as Edward Longshanks. As a young man, Edward II was tall, strong, and handsome. He liked outdoor work, rowing boats, digging, and spending time with common people, not something most kings did. When his father died in 1307, Edward became King of England. At first, people hoped he would be brave and wise like his father. But soon, things went wrong. Edward trusted the wrong people. His closest friend, a nobleman named Piers Gaveston, became his favorite. Gaveston was charming, but arrogant. He showed off his power and insulted other lords. The nobles hated him, and they also disliked how close the king seemed to be to him. Some historians even believe Edward and Gaveston were lovers, which in that time would have been seen as a scandal. The angry barons forced the king to send Gaveston away, but Edward always brought him back. In 1312, a group of lords captured Gaveston and executed him. Edward was heartbroken, but his power was too weak to take revenge. England began to fall apart. The country lost battles, especially against the Scots, who defeated Edward at Bannockburn in 1314, one of the worst military disasters in English history. The king's rule grew weaker every year. His wife, Queen Isabella of France, grew cold toward him, especially when another man, Hugh Despencer, took Gaveston's place as Edward's new favorite. Despencer was greedy and cruel. He took land and wealth from others and made many enemies. Soon, even Isabella turned against her husband. In 1325, the queen traveled to France and met a powerful English exile named Roger Mortimer. Together, they planned to remove Edward from power. When they returned to England with a small army, Edward's support collapsed almost overnight. The people were tired of him, and his allies abandoned him. His friend Despencer was captured and executed in a brutal public show. Edward himself was taken prisoner and forced to give up the crown to his teenage son, who became Edward III. The once great king was now a prisoner, a man who had lost everything. At first, he was kept in a castle called Kenilworth. Later, he was moved to Berkeley Castle, a lonely fortress surrounded by fields and fog. What happened to him there would become one of the most famous mysteries in British history. According to the official record, Edward II died on the night of September 21st, 1327, but no one could agree on how he died. Some reports said he became sick and died naturally. Others whispered that he had been murdered. One story said he was smothered with pillows so that there would be no blood, but another tale, the one that shocked the world, claimed that Edward's killers used a red-hot poker. They supposedly pushed it into his body through a horn so that no marks could be seen on the outside. The act was said to be both a punishment and a warning, punishment for his rumored sins, and warning to anyone who challenged the new rulers, Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer. For hundreds of years, this was the version that stuck in people's minds. It appeared in plays, books, and poems. Even today, if you ask someone who knows a little British history about Edward II, they'll likely remember the red-hot poker story. But was it really true? Historians aren't sure. The story came from writers who lived many years after the event. They often mixed facts with rumors and moral lessons. To them, history was not just about truth. It was also about teaching right and wrong. A shocking death made a better story. Some historians think the tale was made up by Edward's enemies to make his death sound like divine punishment, as if he was paying for being a weak and sinful king. Other writers said he was smothered quietly to avoid attention. There are even reports from France claiming he was poisoned. Nobody agrees, and no one has ever found hard evidence of what really happened inside that castle. And then, a few years later, another story appeared, one that changed everything. Around 1330, a notary from Italy named Manuel Fieschi wrote a letter to Edward III, the son of the dead king. The letter said that Edward II had not been murdered at all. Instead, he had escaped from Berkeley Castle with the help of loyal supporters. According to Fieschi, Edward disguised himself as a servant, fled to Ireland, and later traveled through France to Italy, where he lived as a hermit in a monastery. The details were surprisingly specific: names, places, and routes. Could they have been invented? Maybe, but the letter was real, and historians have studied it for centuries, trying to decide if it was a hoax or a secret message, revealing the truth. There were also reports of a mysterious man seen in Europe during the 1330s who claimed to be Edward II. Some people called him William the Welshman. He looked like the king, spoke several languages, and seemed to know things only Edward could have known. He gained followers and caused political trouble until his claims fell apart. Still, his appearance made people wonder, had the king survived his supposed murder? If so, who was buried in Gloucester Cathedral, where Edward's tomb lies to this day? Even in his own lifetime, no one seemed completely sure whether Edward II was really dead. The truth may be that Isabella and Mortimer wanted to keep their options open. Killing Edward was dangerous if people found out. It would cause outrage. But if they only pretended to kill him and hid him somewhere far away, they could control the story. A secret prisoner could be useful, a living hostage. Maybe they let him live quietly under guard. Maybe they even helped him escape once their power began to fade. The possibilities are endless, and that is what keeps this story alive, even after 700 years. Centuries passed. Kings and queens came and went. The tale of Edward II became just another dark legend in English history. But then, in the 21st century, science entered the story. In 2012, archaeologists famously found the body of another lost king, Richard III, buried under a parking lot in Leicester. DNA testing proved his identity. That discovery inspired researchers to re-examine other royal mysteries, and Edward II was near the top of the list. His tomb at Gloucester Cathedral had always been known, but was the body inside really his? In 2018, a small scientific study began, quiet and careful. Because opening a royal tomb is a sensitive matter. Researchers weren't allowed to disturb the body. They could take tiny samples of material that had leaked from the coffin into the stone around it. Using modern technology, they searched for traces of ancient DNA and chemical clues that might reveal who was really buried there. The results were incomplete, but they were fascinating. The DNA fragment suggested that the person in the tomb had genetic links to the Plantagenet, family the same royal line as Edward II, that fit the story. But another test, one looking at DNA passed down through the mother's side, didn't quite match what historians expected. It could have been an error caused by time or contamination, or maybe it hinted that the body wasn't Edward's after all. Scientists were careful not to jump to conclusions, but they admitted the data raised new questions. Other studies looked at chemicals in the coffin area. They found signs of mercury, a substance often used in medieval embalming to preserve royal bodies. They also found traces of a diet rich in meat and fish, exactly what you'd expect from a medieval noble. All this suggested that whoever lay there was certainly a person of high status, maybe even a king. But again, the evidence wasn't clear enough to prove anything beyond doubt. To get a full answer, scientists would need to open the tomb completely and take bone samples for full DNA sequencing. That might never happen, because disturbing royal remains is legally and religiously complex. For now, the truth stays buried literally under the stone floor of Gloucester Cathedral. Still, this mix of legend and science keeps Edward II's story alive. It shows how history, rumor, and modern discovery can collide in unexpected ways. We may never know for certain whether Edward died that night in 1327 or lived in hiding somewhere far away. But the mystery tells us something deeper about human nature. People in every age love stories of betrayal, survival, and hidden truths. We like to believe that even when history says someone is dead, there might still be a secret waiting to be found. The idea that a 700-year-old skeleton could whisper the truth through its DNA is both chilling and exciting. It reminds us that the past isn't as silent as it seems. So what do we make of Edward II? Was he a weak ruler destroyed by his enemies, or a tragic figure who outlived his own legend? Did he die screaming in Berkeley Castle, or did he walk away into the shadows, living quietly under a false name until the end of his days? The answer might lie hidden in a few ancient bones, or perhaps in stories still waiting to be told. One thing is certain, the mystery of Edward II refuses to die. And maybe that's what keeps his name alive after 7 long centuries, because sometimes the truth about kings and the lies told about them are one and the same. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into one of England's darkest mysteries, leave a comment below. Do you believe Edward II really died at Berkeley Castle, or do you think he escaped? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories where history meets mystery.